welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing another Section A past paper for micro this time, and specifically we're going to be looking at a A2 paper. So this is a combination of both AS and A2 content. As you can see here, it's the advanced one, not the advanced subsidiary. And I'm going to run through, as I always do, the questions, give my explanations, go through some of the theory, and hopefully this will help you to understand the content better. As per usual, I'm going to try and do it in under the 30-minute allocation that's been given. Given 30 minutes, but as you will hopefully know, as part of your exam, it's essential that you try to save time on this Section A so that you have more time for Section B, Section C, where the marks are going to get higher, and they're going to have more of an overall influence on your final grade that you get as well. So let's get started. So question number one, fuel duty is an excise tax imposed on the sale of petrol included in the price paid by consumers, set at 58 pence per litre. Draw a supply and demand diagram to show the incidence of specific petrol tax on consumers and producers. Okay, so we can definitely do that. We need to draw a demand and supply diagram, as I mentioned. So P and Q, then there's my demand for petrol, and then here's my supply of petrol. Now, typically you can make them more price elastic, inelastic, depending on what you want to do. The demand for petrol is obviously very price inelastic because it's a necessity. And then I'm going to draw my initial equilibrium here. So this Q1. So if there was no intervention from the government, this is what you would expect. Now, this is S, let's say, without tax. Now, an indirect tax, like an excise tax, I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that, is always charged on the producer, but the producer can then choose to pass it on to the consumer. So because it's charged on the producer, we show the supply curve actually shifting inwards like so. And I'm going to show it as being parallel because it is charged per unit, so it's going to cause a parallel shift in the supply curve as well. So this is S with tax. Okay, and I can draw a new equilibrium. Here's Q2 and here's P2. So that's the price now with tax. And you can see that the quantity has gone inwards, the price has gone up. So this is because, for example, the government is trying to stop in some ways the consumption of petrol because it has a negative externality associated with the pollution. Now, if I want to show the incidence on each, because it wants me to show the incidence of a specific petrol tax on consumers and producers, basically it's saying, how's it affecting consumers and producers? Well, to do that, what I do is I go to, from this point here, and I go all the way down to this supply curve here, and then I move across like so. Now, in terms of the incidence, okay, the box that we care about, I'm just going to change the color here in order for it to be more clear, is this box here. And I've made, I don't want that. I don't like that. So we're going to go back up like so. There we go. So let me just change the color again. I'm going to go for, this is going to represent our producer surplus. Oh, sorry, producer incidence. And so this line here, this line that goes in between, this one is easier if I say like that. And below, this is the incidence on the producer. Then my other color, let's go for this purple. This is the consumer incidence. Okay. Do I need to do anything else? I don't believe so, because we've shown the inward shift of the supply curve caused by, and the parallel shift, because we know it's a indirect tax and a specific tax, which means that it's going to only be a price per unit. It's not increasing the more you produce. And we've shown the producer incidence and consumer incidence. So I think we can leave it there. Okay, part B, and I'll go back to my original color of red. The indirect tax on fuel is increase in a market in which the price elasticity of demand is minus 0.1. So that means that it's a price inelastic product between less than greater than -1 and less than 1 basically shows that you've got a price inelastic product. Which one of the following is the most likely effect on consumer and producer surplus? Well, okay, so for consumer surplus, sorry, we know that that's going to decrease 100% because consumers have to pay a higher price for the product now. You can see that from the shift here of P1 to P2. So we definitely know that consumer surplus is decreasing, so we can get rid of D and we can get rid of B. Now with producer surplus is also decreasing, partly because part of the revenue that they're generating is going in tax. So they're not actually receiving that anymore. And we can show that on the diagram, but I'm not going to do that right now. So what you need to know is basically they can produce less, the producer, and they get less revenue for it. So the price, ultimately, the price that they would have gotten is lower, or the revenue they would have gotten is lower. So the answer is A. Okay, the external benefits of higher education include increased tax revenue, faster economic growth, greater innovation, and labor market flexibility, all telling me that there are positive externalities associated with education. It helps if I can spell. There we go, positive externalities. Draw an externality diagram to show the likely impact of the consumption of higher education. So, I mean, this is definitely going to have a positive externality of consumption because of all the positive impacts it has beyond the person who's studying, like, for example, faster economic growth, increased tax revenue. So on the y-axis and the x-axis, we have slightly different labels or labels that we can change. But in this case, we're going to put cost/benefit. And this one would just do quantity of higher education students. Now, here we go. So initially, we will have this demand and supply, and this is here going to be our original equilibrium without any without showing any impact of or the underconsumption of, in this case, higher education, which provides a positive externality. So this is PE and this is QE. Now we need to label the diagrams. For a positive externality of consumption, the supply curve is not going to change, so we just put that is marginal private cost is equal to marginal social cost. Because we're going to show demand shifting outwards to show actually we want greater consumption of this, I need a second demand curve. And the original one shows you the private benefit to the person who consumes this good. But we know that there's an additional benefit, a social, an externality that creates a social benefit as well. So we have the marginal private benefit being before the first initial diagram to show the benefit to that person who gets it. But we also want to show the benefit to society. So this is the marginal social benefit. And what we're saying here is this is the allocatively efficient point. Let's call this Q2, where it was the optimum allocation of these goods in this case. So actually, this is not showing us an increase in price here. It's just showing us an increase in benefit to society. This is why it's labeled as cost or benefit on the y-axis. Now, if I want to draw an externality diagram to show the likely impact of the consumption of higher education, because it's 4 marks, we need to do a little bit more than this. So I'd recommend that you label at least where the positive externality is. So in order to do that, we need to draw a line going up from our original equilibrium here. And we can say that that's not very nice. Let's go back, get rid of that. This bit here, let me say, let's call that A, and let's call that B. That shows the value of the positive externality, or yeah, the external benefit. A, B equals external benefit. Now, another thing that we can do, I'm going to do this in purple, is we can draw in this little triangle here. And that triangle represents the welfare gain from having greater consumption of higher education. Now that should give us enough in order to get all the marks. We've correctly labeled the diagram. We've shown the external benefit, the positive externality of consumption. We've shown the welfare gain from consuming it with the purple triangle, and we've labeled all the curves correctly because it's an externalities diagram. On average, in the UK, a working age graduate earns approximately 10,000 more per year than a non-graduate. This suggests a university degree provides well, just because it's about the person who's taken the degree and is earning 10,000 more, that's going to be someone's private benefit. So the answer is C. It's not external cost. There's no external cost there that it's referring to. There's no external benefit. We're literally talking about one individual, and it's not social cost. So we can get rid of all of these other alternatives. Question 3 on tradable pollution permits. Okay, so the EU tradable pollution permit scheme is expected to become more effective by 2020 due to recent reductions in the number of tradable pollution permits. Okay, explain what the effect of reducing the number of tradable pollution permits. Well, one effect is going to be a higher price for each permit. And this will reduce the amount of pollution as each permit allows a set amount of pollution to be done or be created by a firm. Now we can use a diagram to illustrate this point. So at the bottom here, if I'm thinking maybe, that what I've written there is probably not enough to get you 4 marks. So here we go, price of permits, quantity of permits. The crucial thing to understand here is that the supply of tradable pollution permits is perfectly inelastic. Supply of permits. 1. Okay, so here, don't like that demand curve. There we go. Here's demand for permits. Now, these demand for permits comes from firms who are going to be polluting. So originally, the price is here and the quantity is here. Now, if they reduce the supply of permits, you just show an inward shift of the supply curve. And then we have S of permits 2. There's a contraction along the demand curve as fewer firms can afford to buy as many pollution permits, and it drives up the price. And then Q2 there. There we go. That's our one effect, and we've shown a diagram as well to supplement our answer, which should give us all 4 marks. Regulations of firms that pollute is likely to be a problem because it allows firms to use price signals. No, that's not correct. It's going to distort price signals. The supply of permits being reduced. Creates unintended consequences sounds correct. Fills information gaps for businesses. No. Regulation usually causes problems in terms of increasing the amount of information gaps, and lower administrative costs is definitely wrong, because regulations mean strict standards that you have to actually meet in order to produce, trade, whatever it might be for a good. So the answer is definitely B. The following illustrates the daily average cost for a donut producer. So they've got average cost. Explain what happens to total costs at output levels greater than Z. Oh, okay. Well, actually, what might be nice is to annotate this diagram. So let's say that that's C1. And let's go to point X here. We can see C2. So we know that costs are increasing. So at outputs greater than Z, total costs are increasing. as shown by the change from C1 to C2. Excellent. Okay, now question B. At output levels, and that's only 2 marks, so that should definitely get us both marks. At output levels greater than Z, which one of the following correctly identifies what will happen to the cost? Okay, so average fixed cost. Average fixed cost, remember, is fixed cost divided by output. So the more you produce, the lower your average fixed cost should be. It doesn't matter if this diagram is going back up again, like we can see here. Your average fixed costs are going to be going down because output is increasing. So immediately I can get rid of C and D. Okay, average variable costs. If the diagram is going back up, average variable costs have to be going up because average fixed costs are falling. So otherwise it doesn't make sense. Otherwise the average cost should be decreasing and maybe you are achieving economies of scale. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but A is wrong. So B, this is the only one that actually makes sense. As you see that the diagram is going back up, it must be the case that average costs are rising, or average variable costs are rising and marginal costs are increasing as well. Okay, question 4C. For a luxury donut producer, the average selling price is £2. The average variable cost is 40% of the selling price and its fixed cost per day is £300. Calculate the total cost per day, assuming it produces 400 donuts per day. Okay, so total cost is fixed costs plus variable costs. That's the first thing you need to know. We already know fixed costs are £300. We don't need to do anything other than that. What we need to work out is variable costs. So variable costs are calculated by taking the cost per unit and then multiplying it by the total amount of units produced. So I know that they sell 400 units per day. So I'm going to times whatever the variable cost per unit is by 400. And they're telling me that the variable cost is 40% of the selling price. So I can do, there's a couple of ways I can do this, but the easiest one probably is 2 times 0.4, which will give you 0.8. So that's telling me that the variable cost is 80p per unit, but that's fine. I can leave it like it is for the moment, and I can do 0.8 times by 400, which will give me £320. So now I know what my variable cost is, £320. So my total cost is £620, just adding those two together. Okay, now on to question 5, the last question of section A. 25 marks in the bag, hopefully. So Betty's is a luxury cafe first opened in Harrogate in 1919, specialising in afternoon tea service. Since then, it has opened a further 5 branches in Yorkshire. It has no plans to increase the number of cafes. The 6 branches have 2 million customers a year. Sounds like they're doing pretty well for themselves. Explain one likely reason why the business has remained small. Well, there can be lots of different reasons. So we can think about like the managers wanting to maintain control of the business, stopping from having diseconomies from growing too quickly, diseconomies of scale from growing too quickly. Maybe they're not actually making a significant amount of profit, or maybe they've got too much debt, and maybe it's difficult to finance expansion. Any number of things. Maybe they're growing too quickly, but one likely reason why the business has remained small. Let's go with to avoid. Actually, you know what? To improve the service of the business. So one likely reason is to ensure the service offered is always a high quality. And we could say, as the business grows, and they may counter managerial diseconomies of scale through lack difficulties in communication. Therefore, they remain small to avoid this. Okay, explain why previous expansion of this business could be described as organic growth. Okay, so organic growth is basically just not relying on external sources of finance or mergers or takeovers to facilitate your growth. So it's just coming from within the business. And I guess what we could say is that we don't get any indication that they have used external finance in order to open up lots of different branches of their tea shop. So perhaps it's a case that they've just used the profit that they've generated from having 2 million customers a year. So let's go for that. Could be described as organic growth. As there's no evidence of mergers / takeovers to facilitate growth. And then we could say the business may have grown through reinvestment of profits from their 2 million customers. 2 million customers per year. Happy days. All right. Assume Betty's merges with a major tea leaf supplier. Excellent. That sounds good. Which one of the following is most likely to be an advantage as a result of this merger? External economies of scale will increase efficiency. Greater control. Which one of the following is the most likely to be a result of this merger? Okay. Greater control to lower prices of tea. That's definitely a potential because then they can work with their other company, their producer of tea, to lower the price. Industrial diversification increases risk. No, go away. Lower monopoly power in the cafe market. I've got no idea. They probably have an increase in monopoly power because they'll have more price control. Okay. So external economy scale will increase efficiency. No, we're not going to go for that one. That's not the right one because external economies happen outside of a business but within an industry. So it's not likely to be the case. Greater control to lower price of tea seems the most appropriate for me, just because you've got this vertical integration that's going on, and you can then use your producers to lower the prices, and you can work with the producer, your other company that you've taken over, that you've bought, in order to ensure that you get the best price for your product. Okay, that's done. So then you'd move on to section B, and obviously you can see that it's about the UK rail industry, so probably something to do with, well, let's have a look. Subsidies, demand, nationalisation, privatisation, those kind of things. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for today. And if you have any questions, just put them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it with people who might need it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.